Welcome. You are watching Sadie Sharp on Sharp Shares, the weekly video blog talking about life, work, charity, education, and everything else in between that makes us who we are as human beings. Now, this week's session is with a lovely lady called Angela Bryant, who has actually gone on to launch her own dream innovative organisation. But she, very much like me, has had quite a journey to get her there. So I really want to get her on the show this week to share some of her learnings and the ups and downs of her journey, and see whether she might be able to give us any golden nuggets around what you could be doing if you are considering the same kind of transition. So welcome, Angela.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Yes, lovely. Thank you. And this is actually being recorded on a Saturday as well, nonetheless. So thank you for getting out of bed early on a Saturday morning to make sure we can get this in this week.
No problem.
So, Angela, now I know that we had a chat last week and you divulged so many lovely things to me about your journey and how you've kind of come to where you are today. So I wondered if you can tell us around, how did you sort of start off? How did you maybe work your way through the corporate world and then kind of end up where you are with your lovely organisation, and tell us a bit about that.
So yes, so I did maths as a degree and as a master's, but didn't really have any clue what I wanted to do with my life. I had no, long-term idea of what I wanted to be. Still don't really know. So I just basically knew that I wanted to go and work in London in a suit, commute, working in an office for a big organisation, and that's all I knew. So very luckily, I got onto a graduate training scheme and went off into, FTSE 100 companies. So I did that for the first 12 years of my career. I had two different corporate roles, two different organisations, and just basically worked my way up through those corporate organisations, doing different roles, just taking whatever opportunity was presented to me, not really overthinking what my next step was. Just being flattered quite often that somebody thought I was doing a good job and wanted to, suggest I went for something new or different. So yeah, I had 12 years of doing those sort of corporate career, climbing that corporate ladder. I was at one point apparently the youngest ever senior manager at one of the companies with my, driving a BMW at mid-20s, and it all felt very glamorous. Lots of international travel, good salary, all the perks that come with working in the corporate world. And my plan with my husband was that we were going to work till we were 40, and then we were going to sort of downshift and take the money while we could, and then maybe get out the rat race and relax a little. But things came to a head after about 12 years where after we got married on honeymoon, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I just have no interest in it. I'm just not engaged. I'm not passionate about it. There's so many things outside of work that I'm more interested in. I can't do it anymore. So that was that, and I went back and started the process of figuring out how to leave. So so that was the sort of first chunk of corporate path, and then I went on and moved to much smaller organisations for a sort of a second chunk of my career, which was probably about the next 6 years, where first off I worked for a sustainability consulting firm in London. And then a bit later on after that, I sort of started my own business and was still consulting in London. But then I went on to become the exec director of a not-for-profit that was focused on carbon cutting. So both of those all that work was very much focused around sustainability and climate change and carbon cutting, and all things I was passionate about and interested in. So it was very interesting going from these sort of massive corporations, 10, 20, 40,000 employees, down to 10, 20 employees, much, much, much smaller numbers. But fascinating nonetheless, really interesting, some good projects, and lots of interesting clients. But along the way, I was working far too hard. I was running a not-for-profit as the chief exec, was incredibly hard. It was relatively new, there were no processes in place, and it needed everything. A lot of things sort of creating from scratch, processes, systems, fundraising, everything. And I think over the course of this sort of 6 years of working for these smaller organisations and trying to prove myself in those roles, I really burnt out. I was doing long, long commutes. I was grabbing food on the run every breakfast, lunch and dinner at my desk, on the train, on the tube. I was just stressed out, not sleeping enough, drinking too much, not eating well. not exercising, all those lovely things. And it finally came to a head. I had a few health issues along the way. I had some digestion problems, and then finally got to the point where I was so burnt out, I just couldn't do it any longer. And this was about 6 months before my 40th, where I just said, this is meant to be my perfect dream job. The job I was in, the running the not-for-profit, just on paper felt like what I should be doing with my life. And I was miserable and stressed and horrid. And I was like, I don't want to get to 40 and still not know what I want to do with my life. So I decided I was going to leave, and that it was the right time to do that, and give myself 6 months off to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I was obviously in a fortunate enough position that I could do that, thanks to the corporate salaries from previously. And yeah, I could just really reevaluate and try and figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And it's now 7.5 years later. So it's my birthday this week. And so I've had 7.5 years of working for myself, working from home, creating an online business, learning all about how online businesses work, and creating something for myself. And it's been 7 years of experimenting and testing and failing and learning and trying something new and exploring different options of things that I'm interested in. So some of the things I've done, I retrained as a health coach, which is something very big in the US. There's far fewer in the UK, but it's a bit like you would have a career coach or a sports coach or a life coach. It's that sort of idea, but it's somebody that works alongside you in your health and well-being journey to help you achieve your goals and what you want to achieve in terms of your health. And I did that for a few years, and set up, or helped set up, the UK, the sort of national governing body in the UK for health coaches, which was a fantastic thing to do. I've also done lots of online business training, so I'm now quite an expert in how you build an online business, how you do online business marketing, websites, all those sort of things. So I did a lot of work sort of running those sort of businesses for other people, because I'd got the corporate experience and experience running organizations. What I'm really good at is that behind the scenes COO, CTO type person. I'm not very much the sort of visionary big picture person. I'm very much the integrator, the doer, so I can sort of run the organization where somebody else is the front of it. I really enjoy doing that. So I did lots of that. And then a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, my husband and I went traveling, because we'd never had our student, gap year. So we thought we'd do it now. And we went traveling for a while. And while I was traveling, I was trying to run my online business remotely, and, while I was traveling and being location independent. And I was using, day in, day out, we were obviously on the move, traveling around New Zealand at the time, and using TripAdvisor and booking hotels, restaurants, activities for the following day. And at the same time, I was trying to build this online business and learning things. And I was just like, suddenly had this download moment of flash of inspiration where I thought, why does TripAdvisor not exist for all the tools, the courses, the experts, the coaches, the people that are building online businesses, and the tools they use and the products and services they offer? And realized there was nothing like that out there, nowhere that you could find out which email marketing system to use, or which social media scheduling system, or which website platform, or which coach to use as a business coach, or which course to learn how to design your logo, or how to learn how to do Facebook ads, or any of the things that online businesses do. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of courses and experts and people and platforms out there, and there's no way of rating them or reviewing them. All you ever get is their perfect testimonials that are crafted on their websites. And so I decided that was my big thing that I actually had to create, and that I was really super excited about and really wanted to develop. So I've been doing that for the last few years. And that's now up and running, and that's now the focus of my life, is building that and turning that into a platform that everyone uses and that can provide real value and service to online business owners.
Absolutely.
So that's a long blurb of the last.
Perfect. You put everything into a nutshell, which is amazing. And that business is called Angel Rated, right?
That business is called Angel Rated, which also came to me. Everything about the whole business, the design, the database layouts, everything came to me. And the name, we had a travel blog that also had the name Angel in it. Obviously, it comes from my name, Angela. I often get called Angel in emails by accident. And it's also about the community of angels, the sort of just be an angel. You know, it's that sort of, it's not a religious particularly connotation or anything. It's just that idea of a community of angels coming together, supporting each other, providing, you know, information that the rest of the community can use and that's helpful and, you know, makes it easier for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think certainly one of the, I guess, the lessons that I will often say to some people that I'm kind of coaching and mentoring within their startup journey is you do need that community. You need the people around you to help you do it, because if it stays in your head and you try and do everything yourself, which is always the temptation, there is only so far you can go. So you absolutely need that community, but sometimes, you know, you don't necessarily have physical access to that community. So knowing that you've got somewhere that is trusted, that can say, well, I did this and I did this, that might work for you, and you've got the rating ability, then perfect. You know, it's an extended support network, right?
Absolutely. And it's also about things being written by people who are in the same situation as you, because there are some things that are just rate the platforms that are very much aimed at small and medium enterprises, that are very masculine and very tech driven. And yeah, not the sort of people that I'm talking about. So it's a different target audience, and therefore, luckily, if you go to Angel Rated, you know that the stuff on there is written by people who have been on the same journey in the same situation as you. So
interesting. Okay, so I guess certainly when I spoke to you last, the one thing that really stood out for me was just, although it was in completely different sectors and spheres and things, how our journeys were almost kind of sort of stage for stage so incredibly similar. But at the same time, I'm guessing both of us probably went through the same sort of thought process where you feel quite alone and you feel quite isolated, and you kind of, certainly when you're in the thick of the what am I doing with my life and what do I actually want to do with my life, it feels very isolating and quite lonely. So I think one of the reasons I wanted to sort of do these blogs and bring people like you in was saying, actually, you know what, if you are in the thick of all of that stuff that goes bouncing around your brain, you're not the only person. But then also to give those little glimmer of hopes at the end of the journey as such. So your journey through the corporate world, out of the corporate world, there were obviously a few key moments for you where it was a bit like, I think the movie references is a bit like it's a sucker shot where it goes dong dong dong, all of a sudden it's right up front and it's like, oh my gosh, what just happened here? And like you said, the traveling so much, the working on sort of like life events, and you think, what am I doing? Like, this is not what life should be like. And I'm not being funny, but nobody's going to put a plaque on the wall say, thank God Angela put in her blood, sweat and tears, because this organization would not have survived without it. And those moments do come at you like a brick in the side of the head, don't they? All of a sudden you're like, oh, okay. So yeah, those realization moments were obviously quite pertinent for you in your journey.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there was that feeling all along that I didn't quite belong, not in a imposter syndrome kind of way, but more in a square peg in a round hole kind of way. I sort of felt like I was inhabiting this corporate world and, you know, had all the outward signs of success and doing well, but not really caring about any of it, and sitting in meetings just going, I just don't care about what we're discussing here. I just have no interest in it. And everyone else is so passionate, you know, interested in it and really wants it to succeed. And I am, just not interested. And, you know, one of the other things that struck me is that, you know, people are always reading. I love reading, but in corporate world, I just was not interested in reading around the subject and sort of learning more about the topic or the business, and everyone else would be loving reading books. Now, you can't stop me reading books about business, but about the sort of business I want to be building. But in those times, I just felt like, not interested. And I think it also, one of the things that struck me that thinking about it is that I'm quite a night owl naturally. And so like, I would really get into my stride late in the day, but of course you have to be there from the beginning of the day. I'd say you'd be there at the start of corporate world, but I'd still be there at 11 o'clock at night, you know, week in, week out, except when, you know, when I had things on. But, you know, nobody says no one's going to remember that. They don't, as much as they might have all the HR policies, and, you know, there are some good people out there and good corporates, the vast majority of them don't care. You're just, you know, you're there to do a job. And at the end of the day, they are there to please their shareholders first and foremost, and then you are there as a cog in that wheel and a very small fish in a very big pond. So yes.
And I think, like you say, so many people experience organizational life so differently, don't they? Like, some people will not be particularly passionate about the sector, but they really like who they work with, and that's enough. Other people, they can't stand the manager, for example, but they love what the organization is doing or their particular type of role. And I think what makes each of us tick is so fundamentally different that we really need to start analysing, actually, what is it that we want? Like, what makes us happy? Because sometimes, sort of, like you say, square peg and round hole, although I should be loving this, I'm living the dream, I travel the world for work and I working my way up, I get paid bloody well, but it's still not enough. And if you can recognise that where maybe there isn't enough, one thing I think that we can all do is start to recognise that if there is something that's missing, rather than just going to the next level or working longer hours or working harder or taking more on or whatever it might be, we're not necessarily trying to fill that void with more of the same. Sometimes you have to fill it with something completely different. And if that works, then go that way, rather than just stay in that one very linear path within an organizational experience. And I'm guessing that's what you started to do when you were starting to transition, right? Because it takes courage to make that final leap, but you're also starting to fill your time and your life with other types of things, and that's where you realize that's what you loved.
Absolutely. And I think I started doing some things outside of corporate life. I started being on a board of trustees for a charity that I was really interested in, that sort of thing. And I was doing an NLP course that actually was paid for by work, but but it really got you start to think about that. And I think there were quite a lot of things boiled up in that. It's like, I think when you're in that corporate world, your identity is really linked to your job title and your corporate career, and that is such a focus. It's like, who are you, what do you do, and it's all linked to what that job title is. But when you then start looking outside of that, you just sort of realize there's so much more out there. I was so scared because I knew nothing but corporate world, and the idea of doing anything different was so scary, because you have that security of how you understand how the business works, you understand where your pension's coming from, all those things, it's all organized and done. And the sort of idea of personal development really, at that point, it may have changed in the last dozen years, but really was sort of almost a dirty word. You wouldn't even think about it in, self-help would be really sneered upon, about that idea of thinking about and questioning who you are and what you do. But in the world of online business, it's all about self-development and personal development, and people, reading books and really figuring out who you are and what you want, and what's your strengths are and what really lights you up, and where you get lost in time because you're really enjoying what you're doing, and all those things that really make you appreciate what are the great things about what you're passionate about, what you should be doing. And sometimes you're working so head down and blinkered that you just don't have the time to take a breath to even consider any of these things. So I think it's having that space. And I think actually honeymoon is probably one of the, it's a longer break, a holiday where you actually can think about the world a bit more. And I think the other thing I thought about corporate quite a lot is that the amount of times I said to myself, I'm giving it another 6 months, was ridiculous. It's that you just always assume it's going to get better. The next reorganization is going to resolve everything. It's, the next change, the next promotion, whatever it might be. And I'm way too loyal. It was that sort of, I was really hanging on and wanted to stick with it. And I think if you've done that half a dozen times, then possibly you should have moved on a lot sooner. So
yeah. And I think that resonates, certainly for me, but I know for a lot of people that I've worked with, and friends and family, and it's okay, they're making changes, so that will probably make it better. And if the thing that was missing was around the clarity or the structure or the role or the sort of corporate kind of goals and things, then yes, that might have done. But if what was missing was not that, then that is not going to fix what was missing.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that you just said, which again really resonates with me, I know in my kind of run up to 30, yours is kind of run at 40. I kind of hit that brick wall a little bit earlier, and I, in the run up to 30, was having the whole, there's more to life than work. And even then, it was my business, and it was still, I got sucked into doing too much within that business. So I said, right, okay, I had a bit of what I called a Nike year at the time. So I was like, just do it. All those things that you put off because you're too busy or you haven't got enough time or money or effort, just squeeze it in and find something that you do love again. So I did everything from youth mentoring, as you say, working with not-for-profits and trustee boards and things, and I absolutely loved it. I happened to overcommit, so I had burnt out from doing all of that at the same time. So don't do that, boys and girls. But what I think is interesting, you said, actually, when you start to do different things, it's not just work stuff. It's not just more of the same that you think's going to kind of fill that void as such. When you start to do other stuff, although it's scary because it's fundamentally different to how you've maybe seen yourself through that corporate lens and your identity in the corporate world, if you love it enough and it really starts to fulfill you in ways that you weren't getting from organizational life, actually the courage to step into a different pathway becomes more workable, because actually the fear of doing it is still there, but it's more important to do that than to listen to the fear. And I think you need to almost see what the other track might look like before you can take that leap. But until we make the time and the mental energy to want to give ourselves those different experiences, then it's going to be very different. You know, we will stick with what we know. Better the devil you know, right? So
Absolutely.
squeezing those other things into life sounds like that was part of your ability to be able to change tack.
Yes, absolutely. Completely. And in the online business world, there's a real there's quite a lot of people call it the side hustle. It's almost like you start something on the side, you start trying those different things, and you start playing with ideas and seeing what works and seeing what lights you up, and seeing, you know, the things you would want to do all evening and at your weekends that don't feel like work because you're loving doing them. And then, yeah, at some point it gets to the point where it's big enough, it's either secure enough financially, or it's something you can't not do it, because it feels like you're serving something, you're creating something, you're, you know, changing something, and it's important enough that you can't not do it anymore. So you want to give your 100% of your attention to it. But absolutely, I mean, starting to look outside and test the waters, and listening to all those warning signs as well. And I think to make you realize that actually you should be testing these other things out, and you should be trying these things, rather than until it's too late and you cause yourself serious ill health or, you know, worse. It's listening to those things. And I think lots of people bury that, and you bury it through alcohol or through food or through working hard or through, you know, excess in some way. But if you strip some of that back, you can really start hearing those warning signs. And sometimes they are sirens of, I hate this meeting, what am I doing in this role? Or, you know, why have I just missed whatever activity it was because I'm working late? But yeah, or you need to listen to those things and then start trying other things and just dipping a toe in the water and seeing what works and what lights you up, and yeah, what feels fun and what's, you know, invigorates you and all those things. So
yeah, and I think just hearing you talk, I'm going to hazard a guess here, and I might be completely wrong, but having come from obviously the corporate world and making a break for it and then moving more into, as you say, the not-for-profit world and then the self-employed world, I'm going to hazard a guess that you've probably gone through quite a big sort of personal journey during each of those different stages of your life and your career. So what would you say from a personal perspective have been your highs and lows, and maybe what have you learned about yourself along that journey?
Oh, so much. Absolutely. Yeah. So highs and lows. I think, just interestingly, one of the first things that struck me leaving corporate world and going into small organization was just, well, apart from the fact you're then a much bigger fish in a much smaller pond, and you can have so much bigger impact on the organization and on the role you're doing and everything else that's going on. But also just walking into an office where the people feel more like you and you feel more at home, and there's herbal tea in the drinks cupboard, not just tea and coffee. And there are dogs in the office. I mean, this blew my mind when I left corporate world and started working for small organizations, that they made their own rules, that they could run it however they wanted, and you weren't, within this massive structure. I think, so it was, and you meet people that you have more of a deep relationship with, because you are so much more attuned to them and in alignment of values and passions and interests that I wasn't in previous sort of big business work. And I got to do some really amazing projects. When I was working for the sustainability consultancy, one of the things we did was work on the London Olympics legacy. So what was going to happen after the games, looking at the sustainability of that, and working with the organisation there to engage all the local communities about what they wanted to see happen to the site after the Olympics. And that absolutely fascinating project that has shaped a whole area of London. So yeah, some really interesting projects, and it always feels like you're doing something more worthwhile and more impactful. And yeah, I just had much more interesting, enriching experiences. So even running not for profit, just getting out there, meeting different people, and doing things that felt like they were making a difference in the community. So yeah, really, so many highs. In terms of lows, again, loads. I think the same thing of my sort of drive and loyalty and always wanting to being really responsible, always wanting to do the best job possible, means I still worked silly long hours. I still took on way too much responsibility, and still was commuting. So when I was at the not-for-profit, my commute was a round trip of 3.5 hours from home, and I was heading for 40 then, and most of the team were in their early 20s. They would live nearby, they had way more energy, they loved socializing together, they were all really happy, changing the world until 10 o'clock at night, whereas I still needed 2 hours to get home, and then also wanted to have a life and have that work-life balance and see my husband. And I found in all those sort of roles in London, doing those sort of jobs, that there was way too many times when I was crying on the tube on the way home or on the train, going away for romantic weekends with my partner, and alternating between working, crying, arguing with him, with the people I was working with, whatever it might be, just, it really impacting life, and continuing to keep, I mentioned about being unwell, that sort of eating on the run, eating while you're commuting, not eating well, not exercising enough, and just causing yourself some sort of, the older you get, you can't get away with it any longer, so you have to take more care of yourself, and you can cause yourself, you can get to the point of burnout and breakdown and all those things, and cause yourself sort of hidden problems that then start manifesting in illnesses. And I think by the end I was sticking with something because it was meant to be a dream job. In my mind, it was everything I wanted. It was something I was passionate about. I could really have an impact. It was a role I could do the vast majority of well, and some bits of it not so well, but that you could really have an impact. And yeah, on paper, it should have been an absolutely perfect job, and I should have loved it. And I was miserable, really, really miserable. So yeah, absolutely some lows as well. But and it made me really understand. I was almost battling on because I was too stubborn to stop. I was too, I was miserable and stressed a lot of the time, but it should have been perfect, so I was carrying on. And it is that the lessons, it is about knowing yourself. I think during that time, I was beginning to get into the world of personal development and start understanding that there was more to life than especially the corporate approach to careers. And I was really learning to reading lots especially on my commute. My commute was where I learned to meditate. I used to sit on the train and meditate with my eyes shut on the train in the way, and just looked like I was asleep like everyone else. But I was learning to meditate. I was reading books, watching films, really getting into understanding what my strengths really are, and what my passions are, and what I'm good at, and what my ideal day might look like, what my perfect life might look like. Really trying to understand what was working, what wasn't, and just learning much more about myself and the sort of things that drive me, and what I like and what I don't like.
Mm.
So yeah, it was a fascinating time. And looking back, I have so much love for it and the people I met and the role I did. But it was definitely a sort of chunk of my career, had its time. And then, I had to move on and do even more of that soul searching, staring at your navel, figuring
Yeah.
out who I am and what I'm doing.
I think it's often those questions, isn't it, that we're too busy to ask, or we don't have the emotional or mental bandwidth to be able to make
Yep.
space to ask. And
Yep.
it's scary asking those questions, because if the answer does come back and it's actually what you've been working towards for these last 10 years of your life no longer serve you, then you're like, oh, but what do I do and who am I if I don't do all of those things? And that for me was certainly when I after my Nike year, I had a physical mental breakdown, full-blown medical breakdown, because I went way beyond what I should have done. But what's interesting is I often tend to say to people now, and they still look at me like I'm bat crazy, is that the breakdown that I had was probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because it forced me to take that space, painfully so. But also, actually, had I not gone that far and made those really difficult realizations that what I was doing to myself was not sustainable, but it was also trying to fill those voids with more of the same. Even though it was my business, I built it, I worked towards it. You say I was too stubborn to not. This is what I wanted, so I will make it happen, even if I'm not happy in the meantime. And you do all of those things, but until you start to question, say, well, the only person that can make these changes is me. If I don't want it anymore, then who is the world, or maybe sometimes the people around you, to say, no, you have to keep doing that, because that's the pathway you chose, right? And it's like, well, it's a pathway. If I want a different pathway, I'm going to bloody well have a different pathway. And it takes the courage to do that, doesn't it? So I think certainly one of the things that I learned was the challenging periods in my life have probably taught me so much more about myself than the good times in my life, because they force you to take that introspective sort of reflection space, don't they? But I guess certainly for you, having come out of that not-for-profit experience, is obviously quite a challenging reason, a challenging environment, that you learned a lot from yourself. Who did you become? Like, how did you change? And what were maybe some of your, I don't know, maybe those kind of the big sort of sucker punch moments that made you then go on and really launch your own entity, that now it sounds like you feel like it's a complete way to live your life? It's that perfect balance. What was it that changed and that made you really jump into that new space for you?
I mean, that when I decided to give myself the space to have 6 months off, because I really had got to the point where I was exhausted, crying, ill, overweight, all the things that were wrong. And I was just like, just giving myself that time and that space. And I slept and slept and slept. I was clearly exhausted. But I then started that sort of experimenting and learning, testing and trying things out, and doing online courses and learning and seeing what was out. The thing I'd always been interested in, which was sort of linked to sort of environmental stuff, was about food and health and well-being. And that's when I trained as a health coach. And that absolutely opened my eyes to things I did not understand about the world of food and well-being and everything else. That was a real, moment of just beginning to experiment with what I might be interested in and try things. And actually what that led me to was realizing that there were a lot of women who have that same sort of heading for 40 life reevaluation. It's not really a midlife crisis, it's like a midlife, I don't know, reevaluation,
rebirth, isn't it? It's an opportunity for rebirth. Yeah,
absolutely. And actually there's a lot of people, you were saying about heading towards 30, there's people talk about a quarter life crisis as well, around that sort of 25, going, am I on the right track? And there's lots of people, women, especially as they're heading to 40, start, either like a parent has died, or they've got ill for some reason, or they've been made redundant, or their children are beginning to grow up, or there's some sort of trigger, something happens, and you start going, what am I doing?
like
What's
a
my
national
role here?
pandemic, and you're like, oh, okay, the
There's
world
lots
has
of people.
changed. Did I want the way it was? Do I want it to go back to normal, or do I want to
Absolutely.
try and craft something that's
Else.
different? Yeah.
And historically, I mean, obviously, we are not that many generations out of sort of industrial revolution and job for life, and being getting a career hat and saying, this is who I am and that's who you are for life. And the amount, me understanding from starting to work online, that there is a whole world of people out there who are really doing well, building a business purely online. I did a course all around online business and it blew my mind. I cannot like say it strongly enough just how much it blew my mind that there are so many people out there building businesses on their own terms, for their own, just using their strengths, their knowledge, the things that light them up, and sharing those things with other people and building them with a purpose. So really purpose-led, you know, whether it's to do with giving money to charity or making a difference in the world. There's so many people out there doing that sort of thing and earning well from it. I mean, you know, this is not like somebody hiding away just doing some rubbish job on their computer because that's all they can do. They are killing it out there, you know. And these people are multi-passionate. They are sort of, they are not saying, I've got one career and that's it for life. It's we're in a situation now where you can change careers every 10 years if you want.
Yeah, you can, can't you? Like every 5-10 years, you can reinvent yourself and completely change tack, because there are so many opportunities out there with so many different business models, with online or face-to-face service provision, kind of personal services. The world really is your oyster, isn't it? But the key thing, it sounds like it makes a massive difference, as was in your experience, as it was mine, is if you can find something that you love doing, then actually it doesn't feel like you're doing work. Angela, it has been absolutely fantastic speaking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time on a Saturday morning, nonetheless, to come and share some of your lessons with us. So this has been Sadie Sharp and Angela Bryant on the Sharp Shares video blog, talking about everything from life to work to education and charity and everything else in between that makes us who we are as human beings. So please do tune in next week to find out some more fascinating journeys that we are able to share with you, and see if there's some real golden nuggets on how you might be able to pivot your own journeys. Thanks very much.